Hey guys, quick disclaimer. This video is very long. I've just finished filming it and I was filming for like 2 hours. So this is definitely over an hour. And I'm sorry for that, but I answered so many questions. Maybe I'll count them and put the number on the screen here. And I just figured it was better to put it in the one video rather than making you wait for a second or editing a second video. So hope you enjoy the video. Hello everyone, welcome to another Q&A video. It's been a while since I've done one of these, but I figure I'm so pregnant these days, it's hard for me to get up and film videos as much as I usually would. I thought it was a good opportunity to sit down and do a Q&A video, connect with you guys. I do like connecting with you guys, but life is a bit hectic and so I don't always have an opportunity to do it. But today I do, so I'm excited to get into your questions. There were a lot. Thank you to everyone who submitted. I'm not going to be able to answer all of them because I think we got around 200 of them, but let's see how many we get through in this video before the pregnancy fatigue takes over. If I do not answer your question in this video, I did read it. I read all of them. If I didn't answer yours, it's because there were overlaps in questions or I didn't think that my answer was going to be significant or contributional enough to give it, basically, because I didn't know enough about the subject matter. So I don't want to fluff on for too long, so let's dive into the first question. I'll do some YouTube questions and then I'll flick over to Instagram to make sure I answer enough questions from all platforms. It's still really interesting to me that you guys think I have something meaningful to say. First question, I like the way you choose outfits and hairstyles for each character. What was your favorite/least favorite look you've assembled for a video? I should have thought about this before I started the camera. Favorite look? I don't know if I can remember that many looks from my videos, to be honest. And assembling looks isn't something I really put a lot of effort into. I kind of just put on a t-shirt or a dress and chuck a random hair accessory with it. So I wouldn't even say I've gone to a lot of effort to assemble outfits. Maybe the wine video or the wedding videos, I tend to maybe put a little bit more effort into those costumes purely because I'm at a wedding or somewhere fancy, but I don't really have a better answer than that. To add on, I want to know where some of her INTP outfits come from because I love them, like the link shirt, boo shirt, and one-piece shirt. I don't actually think I have a one-piece shirt. I think you're thinking of the My Hero Academia shirt, unless I've worn a one-piece shirt accidentally. I got those all from EB Games. Some of them were gifts from my brother. Hey, I love that you are trying to keep in touch with your fans. What is the hardest task for you getting inspiration, writing lines, filming, editing? At the moment, it is filming, definitely, because it's so physically taxing while pregnant. I would say the hardest thing about being a content creator in general is the admin. In the first 6 months, it was boundaries with people, but I think I'm pretty on top of that now. So I think generally, taking pregnancy out of the equation, I would say the hardest thing is finding inspiration. I usually have to wait for inspiration to hit. I think that's pretty normal for creativity. And sometimes it doesn't hit, but I still have to get out a video. So then I'm sitting at my laptop trying to come up with something and I often feel it's subpar and then I'll have to like park the script and go with a different idea. But when I do have inspiration, it's actually quite easy to write lines and get out content. Which contrasting pair do you like the most? I don't have an answer to that because I just haven't really thought about that. And I think as with any what type do you like the most kind of question, it's a little bit too vague for me to be able to answer in a way that I feel accurately portrays my thoughts on type. What do we need to learn more about MBTI in the future? I think if we could find a way to understand the functions and be able to test the functions accurately, that would be fantastic. That said, I don't think there is a way, so I'm not sure. I think people could just do with learning the limitations of MBTI, learning how good it is as it pertains to them and their ability to understand themselves and their relationships, but knowing the limitations as well and not letting it be your be-all and end-all. Could you dive into the axes of the cognitive functions? YNI has to be paired with SE, YTE with FI, YTI with FE, so on. I've been curious about the logic behind this. Thanks, Kristen. Well, obviously we know that if one side of the axis is extroversion, the other one has to be introversion. So while you've got something going on in your external world, you simultaneously have to have something going on in your internal world, right? We also know that in the cognitive function stack, you can't have two perceiving functions at the top because how can you preference two perceiving functions and just be a perceiver? You've got to have a means of judging the information that you're perceiving. That means that we have to have a perceiving and judging function at the top in those two slots. And then in your third and fourth slot, you've got to have whatever balances out that first slot. And each of the balancing functions is its introverted or extroverted counterpart. Like it has to be introverted or extroverted. If your first function is extroverted, the last one has to be introverted because the extroverted one is objective and the introverted one is subjective. And human beings have a way in which they interact with their objective reality as well as a way in which they judge that subjectively. So you can't have NE balanced with SE. That would be impossible, because then you would just be purely extroverted perceiving with kind of nothing going on inside. So that's why we've got to balance out each of the functions with not only its perceiving or judging counterpart, but the extroverted or introverted version of the counterpart. I hope that makes sense. Also, I'm getting really hot just talking, #pregnancy. So please excuse me while I change my outfit. Next question. How do you get into character for each type? Do you research the type before you film, or is the knowledge so ingrained that you can easily slip into character? And are certain types harder for you to act than others? I must say, acting is so ingrained into my personality. Like, I'm always performing, I feel like, in life. Less so these days, but pre-pregnancy. So I think because it comes so naturally to me, I don't really have to do any kind of preparation. That said, when I'm writing the script, I often do take preparation and sometimes do research into the characters while I'm creating their dialogue. Are certain types harder for you to act than others? I would say ENFP is probably the hardest type for me to act, to get the specific level of NE in the physicality and like unawareness of physical spaces, which yes is a stereotype, like the clumsiness, the stereotype that I've chosen to represent on the channel is harder for me to get into, I think, than all the other characters. How can you tell the difference between INFJ and INFP? Do INFJs and INFPs have any similarities? I would say definitely they do. I don't have the time to go into the in-depth answer here. Look up the cognitive functions. That is going to give you already a lot of answers as to how they're different. I think on the day-to-day, if you're kind of observing these people, just to not use MBTI cognitive function language, I would say that your INFJs using FE and NI versus an INFP. I would say your INFPs are just going to have a general open-mindedness and openness in their conversation that isn't necessarily there, or there in a different way with INFJs. INFJs will want to deeply unpack just one subject for hours and are happy to do that. INFPs will be able to stay on one subject, but they will relate to that subject by jumping onto other subjects. And more specifically, they will be unable to engage in long conversations, especially in a space in which they're comfortable, without referencing their self, their own experience, their own emotions. That is a very pivotal part of their storytelling and how they relate to people. INFJs can easily get away with not doing that as much, as in they don't feel inclined to as much using the FE versus the FI. INFPs will see the world and relate to the world based on their own personal experience and their emotional experience. So they're going to use a lot of emotional language, which is a key difference. I love your videos, Kristen. Do you think you'll occasionally show the baby in the videos or have MBTI interactive skits, such as types interacting with a newborn? In a pre-AI world, perhaps, but I'm pretty committed to not showing my child online. Maybe there's a possibility when our child is a newborn, but at this stage, I'm pretty just set on not showing our child online in general. I am way too worried about the future of AI. Which MBTI is your most favorite except ESFP and ENFP? I don't have an answer for that. What is your favorite color? Periwinkle blue. How did you start doing content on MBTI? I've told this story a few times. Basically, lockdown, wanted to be creative, started making videos inspired by Frank James and Bogdan Yakovets. Someone suggested I upload them to YouTube, so I did, and then it just took off. What will you name your child? Not gonna tell you, although I will give a little hint for you Catholics out there. One of the names of our child will be named after a Catholic saint. That's all you're getting. Do you plan on making XXXX types shoulder angels a series? I look forward to it. I like the idea of making this a series. I really enjoyed writing that script for the ENFP. That said, I can't really make those videos at the moment because I don't fit into the angel costume. And also, unfortunately, those videos don't do as well with the views or for the channel as others do. And I do have to take that into consideration, given that this is my main form of income, and living in Sydney, we do need the dual income. So I do have to consider that when I'm making my videos. What does the general audience like? Versus, you know, that very specific pool of people who are interested in cognitive function theory. And I think just because of the nature of my channel, it being a comedy channel, most of my viewers have not actually dived into the 8 cognitive functions. They kind of stop at a very surface level view of MBTI, and so they get joy out of the comedy. And that just means that those videos don't get as many views. I would like to do that for all of the types though, eventually, just not maybe when I'm pregnant. Which is the most likely personality to make accurate future predictions? I think this question would obviously be an NI user, not because they are more likely to be accurate in their predictions, but more so because they make future predictions. So I think your dominant NIs, INFJs, INTJs would be more likely to make future predictions and think about the future like that. I generally don't make future predictions myself. I'll like speculate what the future could be about, but I don't really know what I'm talking about most of the time, and I'm not invested in it most of the time. So I think just by the nature of how the minds work of NIDOMs, it would be them who would be more inclined to make future predictions. That said, as an ESFP, when it's something that I've got a lot of SE data points for, if I make future predictions on it, I'm right most of the time because I have so much data and experience in my life that proves that A plus B equals C. But I don't do that very often. Which personality type craves the most for like-minded relationships? I don't think there's an answer to this. I think we all in our own ways crave like-minded relationships. Maybe what you mean here is who craves an intellectual connection, but I don't think we can make that judgment based on type alone. What is it like to have TI Trickster, Blind Spot, 7th function, and NE Demon, 8th function? Well, I can't really answer this given that I don't know what it's like to use either of those functions. Therefore, I don't know what it's like to have a life without using those functions. I don't know what I'm missing per se by not using those functions. I can just sort of say that I do get drained in conversations where we're just kind of bouncing ideas off and we're not really going deeper into any of those ideas, which might be my 8th NE talking. I kind of need either an experience, a physical experience to be happening at the same time, or I need to be able to dive into those topics and talk about my own life experience to get joy or value out of the conversation. I can get really drained when it's just kind of discussing ideas. And TI Trickster, again, don't know what it's like to not use TI because I don't really understand it and I've never used it, but I know for a fact, and I've been told, that I constantly forget significant details when if you ask me why I believe things that I do, I'm not very good at explaining on a reasonable level how I reached that belief. I'll mostly be talking about my feelings and my experiences, and how I feel about the thing and why I find it to have value. I can work with a team or explain logically why something has value for the external world in like systems, but my own personal frameworks behind my decision making is purely emotional. And so I'll often be moved to feel something or do something or believe something, but not really have a logical way of explaining it. Or I will forget significant details of like the accurate picture of how the story happened when I'm like retelling stories to someone. And the story that I think actually EFPs, we have a tendency to do this. When we're telling a story, we will kind of hyperbolize or embellish the story, not paying as much attention or putting as much value on the accurate representation of the facts of the story and more our impression or how we felt about the story in order to kind of elicit an emotional response from the person we're telling to be on the same page as us with the story, which can, like, when you don't know that that's something that you have a tendency to do, it can be really bad. Those are just a few examples. I haven't really thought much about it to be super eloquent on that answer right now. In your content, what is your favorite MBTI type to act as other than your own? Just curious. I think I like acting INTJ just because I really like that. The ones that have that really fun stereotype, so INTJ and ENFJ, I think are a lot of fun to act. ENFJ, I really like just over-exaggerating that passive-aggressive energy, which is so bad, but I really like it. Do you like to travel? What unpopular country among tourists would you like to visit? Hello from Russia. Hello, Russia. I do like to travel, but I don't think I have a bucket list when it comes to where I'd like to travel. I'm more the kind of traveler where if an opportunity presents itself, I'll take it and I'll go there. It doesn't matter where it is. I just want to go. So whatever opportunities I'm given, I will hardly ever say no to a travel opportunity unless there is a very good reason, like right now, being pregnant. What inspired you to start filming YouTube videos relating to MBTI? I have already answered that. Do you prefer winter or summertime? Summertime. What do you typically do in your free time? What are your hobbies? My hobbies used to be acting and creating content, like videos just for fun. And now I've made that into my job, which is fantastic. But before I was pregnant, that meant that any time I had free time, I was just working on the channel or writing scripts or filming content. So I didn't have a lot of free time or hobbies because I'd made my hobby into my job. So mostly just like filling gaps with social time. I love getting coffees with people, love getting brunch, love going on little day trips to the beach and stuff like that. I would usually organize a lot of those. Now that I'm pregnant, I don't have the energy or physical ability to do those kinds of things, which really has taken a toll on my mental mental health, if I'm honest. I do have a lot of free time now, but I don't have a lot of introverted hobbies, like things that I can do just by myself. So aside from working on the channel, I like watch TV or read books, though I don't last very long at either of those. They drain me, both of those things. So I'm really struggling at the moment to try and find a hobby. If you're an ESFP in the comments, please let me know what your hobbies are when you are forced to be at home. It's very hard to do as an ESFP. Thankfully, I'll have a child soon who can be my, not hobby, but where a lot of my time goes to. And then hopefully I will be less physically heavy so I can go out and do the things that I like to do with the child. Famous last words. If you could spend the day with one of the introverted MBTI types, who would it be and why? Thank you for creating content I enjoy. Thank you so much. Probably INFP. I just enjoy being with INFPs. I find them very good at listening, generally speaking. I find we're able to relate on that same, I guess, FI, like things being important to us, and we like to hear things that are important to each other. And yeah, I just really appreciate that energy. I find the INFPs in my life, certainly, they're always open to doing things. And they don't really, they kind of go with the flow, so they don't really have a time schedule that's like pressuring them. And they're also like quite passive when it comes to activities, so I can usually make the decisions about what we're gonna do. And the conversation's always great, because they're always interested in hearing whatever deep theory that you have about something, or hearing about your life experience, and then they'll relate with their own experience or give their own thoughts, and then you can kind of go a bit deeper. So I appreciate that. Do you have a passion of a certain MBTI in your life? For instance, you have a lot of ENFPs as friends or have dated other ENTJs before. Let me think about this. Okay, so I had to think. I definitely have a lot of ENFPs friends in my life. I do get along with them and enjoy my time with them. I rarely get bored when I'm with them. So amongst my close friends, I would say that the biggest common denominator is ENFPs, but also specifically FI users. Like my close circle of friends is mostly made up of FI users. Then when it comes to dating, obviously I'm married to an ENTJ now. I had to think. Before Andrew, I was dating for about 12 years, since I was 18, and I met Andrew when I was 30. And so, yeah, I dated quite a few people in that time, and I realized that prior to Andrew, I had dated 2 other ENTJs, so that's 3 ENTJs, and I'd also dated 3 ISTPs. And then thinking a bit more about it, I realized that the most common denominator with the people that I dated was the SENI axis. So I think I was just more drawn to people who thought and experienced life in that way. Maybe not drawn to them, but found connection with them in that way. I certainly, in my dating years, very much like to do activities, so that might explain why so many SE users were in there. Which MBTI are you the most unsure of when making sketches? Definitely INTP. I often think I'm gonna get it wrong. Thankfully, my Patreon community is very helpful with writing scripts and jumping up. There's one patron who has helped me write a few scripts, actually, notably INTP tier ranking. She pretty much came up with most of the stuff in there, and I just kind of tweaked it a little bit. What's your opinion on CPT and or socionics? I'm afraid I have not been able to do a deep dive. The channel has taken up all of my time since it started becoming my main source of income, so I haven't been able to dive as much, because when I'm not working on the channel, which involves me being alone, like working on the channel involves me being alone in my house as an extrovert, it's very important that I spend my remaining time going out and doing things in order to maintain my mental health and work-life balance. So it's just meant that I've not been able to spend as much time diving into the things that I would like to dive into. What do you really think about INFJs? I love INFJs. I have quite a few close INFJ friends in my life. I did a whole podcast episode on this. You can head over and check that podcast episode out, because I talk about it more in that episode. I have nothing against INFJs, I just find their stereotype funny. Is there any particular MBTI you think you want for your child, demanding the unique skill set each of the 16 holds, or you think would be favorite for your child? I don't have an answer for this. I've not thought about it at all. Like I've thought maybe about how I might, for instance, struggle to relate to certain introvert types if they were to be my child. But you know, that's not a challenge in my mind. It's more just like okay, well, how am I going to be able to understand or facilitate the needs of that child? And that's just a thought experiment I've done. In terms of what I hope my child will be, I have no hopes. I'm going to love them regardless. And I very much trust my ability to cater to whatever needs they have and pay attention to their cues and needs and be able to meet them in that. I've taken a couple online cognitive function tests, and my top 3 are a variation of INFP, ENFP, and ENTP. with the occasional ISFP and ESTJ. I consider myself an ENFP and usually look at INFP as well to learn more about myself. I use it as a tool to figure out myself. What's a person to do when they have two possible personalities so close together? Also, why would someone get such a different type in their top 3 or 4 possibilities that seem and feel so different? Very valid questions. The tests are very hard to actually know whether they're accurate. I have a lot of issue with the self-typing element of those tests. I think the best way to know your type is to be observed by someone who knows type while you're not being aware that you're being tested. And obviously that's not possible. So the second best thing I would say is talk to your friends, the people who know you the best, who have known you the longest. Don't use type language necessarily, but ask them pointed questions to get their actual perspective about you, how you manage conflict, what makes you stressed, how you act when you're stressed, where you seem to gravitate to get your energy, what drains you. Ask them questions about these kinds of things, and I think you'll get the most accurate representation of how you actually are rather than your bias. What type is the easiest and hardest to write and portray? I think I've already answered that. What advice would you give to a writer writing her first 16 personalities sketch? Lovely. When you're writing a personality sketch, I would start by, if you don't have a lot of experience with all the types in your life, which is what I use when I'm writing my sketches, I would just think about their dominant function and think about the most extreme version of how that function would present in the real world and write your script based on that, and then come back and do an edit of it and try to tweak the lines to represent the second function and how that would portray, or how that would slightly nuance and change the line you've come up with. So you'd come back and look at your ENTJ and your ESTJ and how you've presented those, and then tweak their lines or how you're presenting them based on the SI-NI difference. Do you base your MBTI characters on actual people you know? Also, what is the most fun part about making a video? I base my characters mostly on interactions I've had with people in the real world, whether that be people I know are a certain type, or just how I imagine a certain function combination would play out based on my life experience with just humans in general. That said, I have used actual sort of conversations I've had with real friends in my life to formulate some of the ideas for my skits. Not like word for word conversations, but the ideas largely come from my life experience with other people, yes. What made you get into MBTI? I have a whole video about that, so check it out here. How might the cognitive functions influence someone's faith journey? The same way that I guess psychology and self-development in general can help with your faith journey, just being honest with yourself about your personality, God-given, the natural virtues and vices that you tend towards because of your personality type, using the type tool to be able to become aware of those, and then actively working to better yourself in those vices or leaning into those virtues as a clue of how God wants you to glorify his kingdom here on earth, because he's given you those gifts for a reason. How have you been feeling in general? Do you think that there are underrated MBTIs in the community? How was your life changed over the years, especially with pregnancy? Do you have hopes and plans for the future? Huge question. I could do a whole video on this, but I'll answer these really quickly. So how have I been feeling in general? Pregnancy has been very hard. There have been a lot of issues. I think I've had a particularly tough pregnancy, but right now we're on the home stretch. And I think, in answer to your question, everything that I'm feeling at the moment has to do with my pregnancy, because it has just changed my life so dramatically, especially as a very physical person. And this body that I have now is now it feels like it's weighing me down, not only because it's so heavy, but just the change in what happens during pregnancy means that you are so much less capable of doing the things that you used to enjoy doing. Like even taking a walk is very hard for me. It involves a lot of physical and mental preparation. So I can't answer this quickly. It's been really rough, I'll be honest, but I'm feeling much better now. Like I can handle it, and I feel like I've adjusted to the idea of being a mother and adjusted to the pregnancy. I'm kind of just ready for the child to come out now. Do you think there are underrated MBTIs in the community? I think that there are stereotypes, and as a result, people, it's fun to poke fun at the stereotypes and write the skits and laugh at the stereotypes. But when you take them too seriously, that's obviously when it's a problem. And I think, sometimes people can, anyone who says, I don't like X type because this, is just potentially not using the tool in a way that's going to help them. How's your life changed over the years, especially with your pregnancy? Way too big a question, genuinely. If you care about these kinds of questions and my answers to these questions, just FYI, I go into a lot more about my personality and my struggles in life and with type and stuff, and just my thoughts and experiences in life in my podcast, I have long form content there. Every episode is like, I think, over 30 minutes. I answer a lot of your questions in much more detail. I recently did a whole monologue about how my life in Korea changed me. So I'm really quite candid on there. So jump over to the podcast if you care about these more personal answers, I guess. Do I have any hopes or plans for the future? Very little. The future is very murky to me. And that's kind of how I'm okay with that. Does YouTube offer maternity leave? Absolutely not, unfortunately. At my level of channel, it has been important for my income to do the regular uploads every single week. My channel isn't big enough to kind of make enough money to live on its own. I proved that earlier this year when I took a 6-week break and my income dropped by like 50%. So I used that as a lesson to backlog a whole bunch of content. I think at this point it's just inevitable. I have to accept that I am gonna have to have some weeks off without any uploads. How do you come up with your ideas and write the scripts? How long does it take? I come up with the ideas from, most of the ideas I've come up with have either been from things I have experienced in real life. So something will happen in my life and it'll jog an idea for a skit, or maybe movies. Like I'll see a cool concept for a movie and I'm like, that could be fun for a skit. Or through the comments that you guys have left. You guys have left a whole bunch of comments suggesting ideas for videos, and I've used those. My patrons also have contributed a lot of ideas to the YouTube channel, and I sometimes throw up Instagram polls on my Instagram page to ask for ideas as well. So a mix of all those. How long does it take? It can take anywhere from 1 hour to 5 hours to write a script, depending how long the video is, depending how much nuance I'm bringing, depending whether it's an interacting skit or just a 1 line per character skit, and depending if I need to do any research on it. But yeah, usually not longer than a day if I'm inspired. Why did you change your video format? I like both formats, but I'm kind of curious about it. I'm not sure to what you're referring here. I assume you're referring to the tier ranking format as opposed to the 16 characters in one video. I mean, the obvious answer is it's way less effort for me to get into just the one costume and sit in a chair and act the tier rankings, which is really important for me, especially during pregnancy. But to be honest with you, I reached a point in the channel where the 16 characters in a skit formula just wasn't working as well. The views were going down. I had noticed for an elongated period of time that people were kind of losing interest in that formula. I think it was growing a bit stale, so I needed to be innovative with new ideas, and I'm always looking for new ideas, so please do send them on through if you're interested, to Instagram or YouTube or my email address. Will you feature your baby in any videos? Will his, her name or gender be revealed? Not sure about the gender. I have not spoken to my husband about that. How heavily do you rely on MBTI and cognitive functions when making decisions or doing tasks? Less so these days, because I think the things that I've learned when it comes to MBTI are just ingrained in who I am now, and they're just constantly running as a filter in the back of my mind. So it's not like active things I'm considering when making decisions. But I mean, I am relying on my cognitive functions 24/7 when making decisions. But yeah, I would say I don't really think about it as much as I did when I first got into it. Do you find MBTI compatibility reliable or unreliable? Not very reliable, to be honest. Any theory about type compatibility has been disproven in my life. I think you can get along with anyone as long as you are open to learning and growing about, like, learning about them and being a good person and loving people. My own included, by the way. I know I made a video about compatibility a while ago. I haven't watched that video in a while. I should probably take it down because I think I disagree with a lot of the stuff I said there. But yeah, generally, largely unreliable. I don't think it's nice to box yourself into being only able to be compatible with certain types. I think it's nice to open the box through your knowledge of the types and the functions, and therefore pointing out your weaknesses and your blind spots so that you can love others better. How do you grapple pregnancy and being an SE Dom? What are the changes you've noticed about how you go about life, still being an ESFP, but dealing with the changes that pregnancy brings? I really appreciate this question. Thank you for asking about the pregnancy. It has been the thing that has consumed my life for the last 8 months almost. Being an SE Dom has been really hard because I have been house ridden, almost like kind of the same as lockdown, but it's almost been worse in a sense because in lockdown I lived with 3 of my best friends. So I was not starved of social interaction. We would always find fun things to do. But now I am in my house, my husband's at work for sometimes 12 hours a day, just by myself, and that is really hard. And I cannot get out and do the hobbies I would usually do or see the world as I usually do because I'm just so physically heavy and I get so fatigued so fast, and we live up 5 flights of stairs, which is always something I have to consider when I leave the house, is those stairs. And I guess as pertains to being an ESFP, in my head I thought I was prepared for pregnancy, but I think with NI being my lower function, there really is only so much preparation you can do. And to be honest, I never really actively prepared or actively thought about it. I was just kind of like, cross that bridge when it comes to it. So I definitely copped that in the first few months of pregnancy when it was a huge life and identity change and I did not know how to grapple with it. So you could kind of maybe blame the fact that I have baby NI for that. Thank you for all of the compliments that you're throwing into these comments as well, by the way, guys. I'm not reading them out just to save time because this is going to be a long video, but I really appreciate all your kind words. What do you think about the opposition typology receives in many church communities? This is not my experience. In the Catholic church community in Sydney, people have generally really liked it. I guess it's kind of like everyone's outgrown it at this point, but I don't really know what you're talking about in terms of the opposition. Maybe there are people who would argue that the seeming dichotomies of the MBTI theory goes against what the church teaches about God and the infinite potential that grace can have when working in your personality. But if you actually know the theory and you dive into the functions and you understand that each one operates on an axis and that you have potential to reach everything and do everything, you can do and be whatever you want, then I don't think there's, like on a theological level, I don't think there's a lot of reason to criticize it. That said, if the opposition is because there's a lot of stereotyping going on or a lot of judging, then obviously I agree that that's not a good thing from a theological perspective. In one of your videos about MBTI and pregnancy, the character mentioned that the kid would get childhood trauma no matter what. Do you believe this yourself? Is that scary? Do you have a plan to handle it and forgive yourself if it happens? I love this question. There's a lot in it. I do think, and I made reference to this in the video, like there's a difference between big T trauma and little t trauma being the less major trauma. And I think, yeah, little t trauma just kind of referring to the daily hardships that happen in life that might sort of form who you are or how you handle conflict, but they're not like super traumatic memories when you think about them or stew on them, but they do have an effect on maybe some unconscious defense mechanisms you might learn to put up in your life or how you handle conflict and things like that. So I think that, yeah, there is a level of hurt that you are going to inflict on your child unbeknownst to you as a parent, like assuming that you are assuming that you're a great parent and you are well-intentioned and you never intend to cause your child trauma. I just think by nature of being human and the fact that you're imperfect, and the fact that this child lives with you 24/7 and you're navigating parenting for the first time, like you've never parented before necessarily, you're gonna snap sometimes, you're gonna not understand them sometimes, you're gonna get impatient with them sometimes. And kids at a young age, they're sponges and they soak up everything. Their brains like double in size in like the first 5 years or something like that. Like they're absorbing a lot. So I do think that there is those maybe unhealthy coping strategies that you have or conflict management strategies that you have are going to affect the child and what they learn and take in about conflict and love and whether they're worthy of love and how to love others, etc. I think you might not even be aware of what you're doing, you know, in that sense. And it doesn't matter what kind of parent you are. I think it's inevitable that a child, you know, you ask a kid in their 20s, you know, when they grow to their 20s, like, what could your parents have done differently to understand you better? I think they'll all have an answer. It doesn't mean they're going to resent you for it, but I think it is inevitable that you're going to be an imperfect parent. I think what matters is that you recognize that, say, okay, well, I'm imperfect, I have vices, they're going to come out. I can either be really sad about that or I can kind of try and work with that and maybe use that as an opportunity to teach the child about forgiveness and the fact that, yeah, we are all imperfect, but we can have the humility to come forward and apologize for those things or be better, you know. So if you know that you've yelled at your kid, you know, that in a way that wasn't warranted, you could approach them afterwards or just yelling in general, even if it was warranted, like just approach them afterwards and sort of say like, I'm sorry for yelling at you. I was feeling a really strong emotion. I shouldn't have yelled at you that way and I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? And then allow your child to say, yes, I forgive you. So yeah, there are things that are going to impact your child, but you know, there are ways to mitigate, I think, the amount of little t trauma that you inflict on them. I haven't had time to phrase that answer properly. So yeah, that was just off the top of my head, so feel free to offer more thoughts and nuance in the comments. How to spot different MBTI types and all about cognitive functions and how to act as an MBTI. If you're interested in spotting MBTI types, I did a whole episode on the podcast called How to Type people in the wild. Basically, I gave my thoughts on my experience of how I type people, keeping in mind that my predominant way of typing people is by tangible data that they're giving me, whether it's in their body language or what they're paying attention to in the space or the language that they're using or their facial expressions. Not everyone, that's not helpful for everyone. What do you find the most challenging part when you're creating your videos? What are some fun and unusual ways you discovered to get inspiration? Asking for a friend, writing a play. Lovely. Most challenging part when creating my videos is, as I said before, finding inspiration when there is none. I've just thought of another one. Acting without a scene partner. That can feel really stale sometimes. Standing in front of a camera, speaking the line multiple times, and you're just at a camera. There's no energy to feed off from a fellow actor or an audience. I often feel like it's cheat acting, like it's not real acting, because I can say the line as many times as I want in as many different fashions and tones as I want and just pick the one that I like. Whereas, you know, when you're on a stage or in a scene with someone, you only get a few takes if you're lucky. And your ability to act well is dependent on the chemistry that you are creating with that person, with that scene partner, and how much you're understanding them and what they're putting forward in their offers and their emotions and stuff like that. And I really miss that about acting. This month I was in a play again for the first time. Why I chose to do it while pregnant, I do not know, but it was a great experience. And I found that I had really missed that. Fun and unusual ways to get inspiration. My way to get inspiration is to interact with people, to go outside, have coffee, have brunch, interact with the world. I can always do more work when I've done that. What is something that you've experienced during pregnancy that you didn't know about or didn't think would happen? How much time do you have? Oof, I could list a lot. There are a lot of physical symptoms that I did not expect, but I think the thing that was the most shocking to me in terms of things I didn't think would happen is I actually had prenatal depression for the first 3 months of my pregnancy, which was a really hard time. And I didn't think that it would happen to me, but it did, and here we are. How long does it take to film a 16 personality skit? Anywhere between 1 hour and 5 hours. Again, depending if we're interacting, costume changes, all that. I think the shortest one I've taken to film was just 30 minutes, and I think that was like the shorts. Like 16 personalities explaining empathy, where I didn't have to change the shirt, I just changed the color of the background. Genius. The baby is moving so much at the moment, and I'm just wondering if you can see it on camera, but I think it is off camera. What's something about yourself that we don't know, but you feel comfortable sharing? Always been pretty open. Something that you don't know about me. I lived in Korea for 2.5 years. You probably know that though. I did semi-professional K-pop dancing for like 2 years as well. Yes, that's something you probably didn't know. I had a little dance troupe. I was obsessed with K-pop because the dancers were just so interesting and perfect. And the dance culture in K-pop is like insane. For someone who likes dancing, it's like you're just drawn to it. And so I formed a little dance troupe with a couple of my friends. And we basically, I guess, got discovered, and the Korean Cultural Office of Australia started paying us to do gigs for them. So there you go. What is your Enneagram tri-type? Also, astrologically speaking, what is your sun, moon, and rising? I know I'm an Enneagram type 7. I've forgotten what wing I am. Feel free to tell me in the comments. Astrologically speaking, I don't look into astrology. I'm not gonna lie. To be completely honest, this is no shade at anyone who likes astrology. I get slightly triggered by it. So I don't know the answer to this, but feel free to tell me in the comments. Do you notice that in crisis, dangerous situations, you favor particular cognitive functions over others? Has this changed in any way over time as you've embraced your inferior functions? The answer to the second question can be found in my most recent video about introverted intuition, so I recommend watching that one. In crisis, dangerous situations, I would say I'm pure TE. Like there's not even any F sensitivity to the people around me. It's just pure TE. Are there any people you know whose behavior/thought process completely contradicts how their type has been established to act or think? Like they're the complete opposite of their MBTI stereotype. What are they like? How are they able to distinguish what their type actually is? Yes, I've definitely met people like this. I know quite a few people who are the opposite of, well, maybe not the opposite of the stereotype, because I think in certain environments they can become elements of the stereotype. Like I don't know anyone who's completely not their stereotype, but I've been pleasantly surprised at how just by being a good person, some people have managed to avoid the overly harsh, loud versions of the stereotypes, because those stereotypes are very vicious versions of, stereotypes are there like as like vicious versions of the functions playing out, like their dominant function. And I noticed this in a big way with my husband, who I was amazed, like as a TE Dom, he really does not fit into the box of what you would associate with a TE Dom being like super demanding and, you know, always on the go and things like that. I was just amazed at how like virtue can help to soften those natural vices that certain types tend towards. And that kind of helped to reshift my thinking on MBTI because my husband doesn't really have interest in it. So it kind of helped to reshift my thinking to be like, MBTI is really just useful for the self, to better the self and understand others. We shouldn't project it onto others because people can become good human beings who contribute to society and love others well without knowing a thing about Myers-Briggs. And in regards to how do you distinguish what their type actually is in those situations, as I said, I think when you know enough about the functions and you have enough data, which for me is like physical data, there are still tells about what their dominant function is, especially their dominant extroverted function, especially if that's their first function. There are still tells because functions in and of themselves aren't vices. So if someone's steering away from their vices, that function is still obvious, just in a much more healthy way. So I'd say just ask yourself, what does each of the functions look like in real life, and not just the stereotypical like vicious versions of the functions, but healthy versions of the functions as well. Do you have any recommendations for info on how mental illness and neurodivergence can impact MBTI and the cognitive functions? I did a whole episode on this on my podcast called MBTI and Trauma. I definitely recommend you listen to that. Long story short, like the short answer is there's not enough research on this, but I definitely recommend taking a listen to that episode if you're interested in this subject matter. Right, so I like how you accept your type as ESFP and live it. So my questions are, was it hard for you to see yourself in your type? What were the early signs of your dominant SE in childhood? I have talked about this as well in my video on NI, so definitely watch that if you're interested, although that's mostly my teenagehood and adulthood. In my childhood, I was just a curious child. I always wanted to be outside. I was interacting and interested in the space first and foremost rather than the people in the space. But I would say I wasn't as obviously an SE Dom child because I was very, very shy and nervous, and I think that was because of other elements of my childhood. So it actually probably, my SE Dom tendencies probably only really presented themselves, unless you're counting like being in high school and being super into drama and theatre and stuff, like only really presented themselves after I left high school and therefore had more freedom and was able to kind of like experience time away from home and therefore learn who I truly was. And then the SE went rampant. Was it hard for me to see myself in my type? Not at all. When my sister first came to me with the type diagnosis, I was like, yeah, that's me. Do you have a favorite running joke from your sketches? There are so many good ones. Thank you. Haven't thought about this, so I might change the answer later, but I think just off the top of my head, I like the milk joke. The ISTP milk joke is really funny. My jokes are really funny. Passive aggressive FE Doms. I love that's a funny running joke to me. Hey Kristen, I hope you're well. Thank you. To start off, what's your favorite game of all time and why? Next, when you were single, did you prefer to show who you were on the first few dates or show your refined picture that the person might like when you started dating? I think we all know the answer to that second one. I could not hide my true personality if I tried. I was always myself on the first dates, and it was great because people could decide really early whether they liked that or not. And generally speaking, it's very hard for me to pretend I'm someone that I'm not, unless I'm in my FI feels and really upset or sad about something, then I just kind of shut down. And what is my favorite game of all time? That's a really hard one. Probably Super Mario 64 because of the positive associations I have with it. Oh, it was such a beautiful time in my life and I loved it. Also Animal Crossing, the one that came out during the lockdown. Also absolute redemption for lockdown. The first lockdown where I lived with my parents. Animal Crossing was just the saving grace of all of that. Are you happy? Yes, I would say day to day, I don't have the emotional happiness one might associate with being happy, just because again, pregnancy at this time, my lack of hobbies, my loneliness, like how heavy I am, like all the things going through my head, getting stressed about the things I haven't prepared for. I would say emotionally on the day to day, I'm not as happy, like as bouncy, as optimistic, but I do have that interior peace and that interior joy that I think is true happiness. What is God's personality like to you? I think I answered this maybe in my other Q&A. I don't think I could type God. Like obviously Jesus is human and therefore had a personality, but I don't think we have enough information or data about Jesus to give his personality. God's personality is loving, kind, merciful, beyond our capacity of understanding. But to be honest, I think God's personality, when we fathom the creator of the universe in his throne in heaven, like our idea of personality just would not even be relevant or do a smidgen of justice to who God is. How would you, ESFP, interact/connect with 16 children? I have no idea. I have not thought about that. I have been in a classroom where I was the teacher with 16 children, and my way of connecting with them was actually, I was a bit of a strict teacher, to be honest. I had very specific time for work and play so that I could then know that in the work time I could meet certain goals, and being strict allowed the kids to kind of, you know, I could be sure the kids would sit down and actually do the work, but then the fun time was for my real personality to come out, and the kids also knew when that there was a time for work and time for play, and the play was fun, so they were willing to do the work, which was great. I'm talking about Korea specifically here. Australia is another kettle of fish. What steps do you go through when struggling to type someone? Also, do you consider publishing a How to Type People for Dummies? I don't think I'm qualified enough. I think my gifts when it comes to type and content creation is like the funny stuff. In terms of describing in a reasonable, understandable to everyone, and analytical way, I don't think that's my gift. Yeah, maybe that's the TI trickster. So I don't think I would publish that. I'm struggling to type someone, what are the steps? I'm not sure. I don't think I actively think about it enough to be like, here are the steps. It just happens or it doesn't. Like I'll type someone, I'll notice someone has a tendency, and I'll like just not even consciously think, but just kind of know, oh, that looks like a TE dominant function or something. That looks like NE. You know, and I might discuss it with someone who's around me who understands type or whatever, but yeah, I don't really have steps. I can tell you that introverts are much harder for me to type. So if I'm like devoted to typing an introvert, I'll just spend more time with them and pay attention to what they're doing and saying and just go from there. Such an EP answer. What values do you hope to instill in your child in the future, and how would you go about doing so? Take care out there, and many congratulations in advance. Thank you so much. Values. The values that I've expressed on my channel are really important to me. Being a good person, being a morally upright person, loving others and like what it truly means to love others. Catholic values are really important to me, though I think those are kind of universal to the human experience. And how would I go about doing so? I think I'm really just devoted to being a good example for my child. It's always been really important to me that I married someone who had the same values as me and the same attitude towards this, but married someone as well who was a good example of love and charity, because I think that is the most profound example you can give of not just Christian values, but like human values that nourish the human heart and the human spirit. And so I think Andrew and I together, I think we are both devoted to being a good example of love by loving each other that our kids can witness. And just in what I've observed through my friends and what they've learned and their parents and stuff like that, I think that is the most powerful example is a good loving relationship between parents. There are other ways that you can learn that in life, but I think given that that's the home you're born and raised in and spend a lot of your formative years in, to have a good parental loving relationship as your example for love is just, you cannot place enough importance on that. So I think that's going to be the main thing. And just trusting that the Lord's got us, and always being open to have conversations and chat to the child, and providing a safe and happy home for them to come home to every day. Hi, I hope you're doing all right. Do you watch any other MBTI YouTubers, any you'd recommend? I do, yeah. I watch Amy Y and Love Who, and Frank James. I go to these channels for different things, but I guess I spend so much time thinking about MBTI that when I do have free time, I kind of tend to consume content that isn't based on MBTI, but I love going to those channels to broaden my perspective on certain types and cognitive functions and things like that. If you had to become a personality type with only one attribute in common with yours, then which one would you want to be? I don't have an answer to that. The only type I would be really curious to be is an INTP, because I think they're just so different from me, just to experience what that's like. A couple of years ago, I tried a would you rather question with classmates in college. Oh, this is fun. Okay. Would you rather only be able to tell the truth or only be able to lie? Only be able to tell the truth, definitely. Would you rather be a twin or an only child? Twin. For sure. Would you rather have a clone with the exact same personality or one with the complete opposite personality? A clone. Probably exact same personality, because then I could learn about myself through observing them and also like help them to be better. And do I have nieces or nephews? Yes, I do. Congratulations on your pregnancy. Thank you. Where do you get the ideas of your videos, and when's your birthday? I've already answered the first one. My birthday is December 14th, 1992. I would love to hear your thoughts on the frequency and possible correlation between MBTI types and common DSM diagnoses. Okay, so I'm gonna say again, if you're interested, have a listen to that MBTI and trauma episode that I did on my podcast. I'll link it below. Again, I don't think we can draw links. There's not been enough research done on this topic, and I think it's actually dangerous to speculate too much or to draw any like conclusions about this. But Again, I talk about it more in the episode, so have a listen if you're interested. Do you think a person's personality type affects what their love language is? I actually do, and I have learned this through the series that I'm doing very slowly called How Each Type Feels Loved. I think I've released 3 videos on it, and you know, I do polls on my Instagram and YouTube to find out how each person of this type feels the most loved, and there are shockingly similar trends between types. The INFJ, ENTP, and ISTP all had very different common denominators when it came to this question, and they all crave very different things in relationships, so I think it's very fascinating. So please watch those videos if you're interested. I will also link them below. I've been following you for a while now, and I've been wondering, how has your perspective on the types changed as you dug deeper into MBTI? It's like anything, really. The deeper you dive into it, the more you realize it's a fruitless journey to try and understand everything about it, because you never will. Personality is so complicated and nuanced, and there are so many factors that affect it, that the more I've studied MBTI, the more I've just realized, like, I'm trying to understand something that I'll never be able to understand. And I love that about personality. There's an infinite potential to who we can be and the virtues we can have, and I like it that way. So I think I've just stopped trying to fundamentally understand everything about every single person, and just kind of used Myers-Briggs as a tool to understand general tendencies in myself and others, and to extend grace, and then kind of let their unique perspective on life and their unique journey and their unique personality do the rest. How do you so accurately represent each type? Do you know someone from each of the 16 personality types and draw your inspiration from them? Or do you estimate their reactions purely based on their functions? I do a little bit of both. Thank you for the compliments. Very much based on interactions I've had with my loved ones. And I also think a lot about how the most extreme version of a function would look, and kind of factor that into the script. Would you say that MBTI has its limitations and some other cognitive function-based systems would be better to use? I think, yeah, depending on who you are, other systems might work better for you. That's fine. MBTI definitely has its limitations. MBTI provides one way of giving language to certain phenomena that present in personality, but it is not the only way to understand those same phenomena. We could use different words, we could use different systems, and I think you can, you know, get by fine and be virtuous and loving and kind without the systems. But yeah, definitely, MBTI definitely has limitations. I go into this in immense detail in a Patreon episode that I released, where I spoke about it for pretty much an hour and a half, like off the back of listening to a podcast episode about it. So if you're interested, check it out on the page. Can you please tell us what are the stereotypes of each MBTI which are not necessarily true? For example, INFJ and INTJ planning years ahead, or knowing the future, or reading people like books. I think there's an element of each of the stereotypes that is true, that is going to present in some form in every person in that personality type, but it's not 100% of the time. And people can look not like their stereotypes, and that is something very important to understand. So I think all of the stereotypes in answer to this question are not necessarily true. And I feel like that feels like a cop-out answer, but I'm not going to give you the tea that you're after. Hi Kristen, I was just curious to know which MBTI types are compatible in regards to dating and marriage. I believe that anyone can be compatible. Yes, certain types would be prone to certain miscommunications and misunderstandings and things like that, but as long as you're devoted to being a good human, understanding and loving, you will get through it. I don't believe any 2 types should not be getting married, and I think that is a very limiting understanding of type. Goodness me, how long have we been filming? Far out, this is a long video. What are your thoughts on some YouTube channels' misinformations on MBTI? Are there specific things to look out for and or avoid? Also, what do you think of Mike Hart's MBTI videos? Haven't watched Mike Hart. Look, I'm not going to answer this in terms of misinformation. I think Myers-Briggs, we all just perceive the system so differently. I think the 8 words that correspond with the 8 letters don't have high explanatory value, and I can't blame people for perceiving them in different ways from how I perceive them. Yeah, okay, so we YouTubers do have a different understanding of type sometimes, but I think it's really good to watch everyone's videos, unless you're going to get super confused, like you discern. But it's good to, you know, watch and listen to a lot of different perspectives and content, and kind of find like the similarities or common denominators between them and their understanding of type, and then use that to formulate your understanding of type. I need to go faster. This is a long video. What do you want most in life that you don't have right now? Goodness me. I want to be a better person, a better, more patient person who loves others better. I would say that's it. If you had to choose, would you marry someone perfectly compatible with you but whom you don't love at all? Or someone you are deeply in love with but are not compatible with? I would definitely marry someone perfectly compatible with me who I don't love, rather than someone I am deeply in love with but are not compatible with. What is love? Love sounds like it's a feeling here, and I don't think you should be basing a marriage on a feeling, because feelings are fleeting, they don't last. And in terms of compatibility, I'm not talking about type here. I mean like compatibility in terms of you share the same values and you are both striving to be people of integrity and virtue. I think that will be a much more successful marriage, and I think you will learn to love each other anyway, in terms of like true agape love, not the feeling of love. What's something you still can't understand about yourself? I think the things I'm working to understand about myself are the things I have recently discovered about myself, having entered this hugely transitional period of being a wife and mother. There's a lot of stuff that's come up for me that I really don't understand. I've had to go back to therapy about it. So I'm just trying to work through, I guess my tendencies and the intrusive thoughts that come to my head about being a wife and mother, and like why I think them. So that's vague, but obviously I'm not going to go into detail about that here. When you make 16 personalities sketches, do you do research? Yes, I do research before some of my sketches, because like for instance, the 16 personalities and their worst jobs, I did a lot of research there by just going on Reddit threads of people who had asked, what's the worst job you could possibly have, to kind of really nail my answers for that one. Is it true that you can be multiple personality types at the same time? No, it is not true. I'm powering through these. Number 2, how do you bond with others? Okay, that's a big question. I will say that I think the most important factor when bonding with others, like a kind of safe way to ensure you will bond with others, I guess, or is most conducive to bonding with others, is ask them questions about themselves. Like actually be interested in understanding who they are. When in doubt, ask them questions. What do they do? What are they passionate about? Like their life experience. Let them talk about themselves. They'll feel valued a lot of the time. Obviously, you've got to sense the vibe. And then, where possible, relate and empathize. I think those are tools that always work in terms of facilitating a bonding environment. Do you have any INTJs or INFJs in your life, like as past friends or family? I was just curious of what your opinions, experience of dominant NI types are, and specifically if you can have any close relationships with them. Absolutely. One of my closest friends is an INTJ, and a few of my close friends are INFJs. Love them. Yes, of course, I noticed their type, in our interactions. Sometimes I'm like classic INTJ or classic INFJ. I won't go into too much detail here, but I did a whole episode on this where I interviewed one of my closest INFJ friends, and we talk about it. So definitely check that out if you are interested. How did you gain the knowledge on how the personality types would act in your videos? I find them quite relatable. Again, real life experience, watching people, understanding human dynamics and relationship dynamics. Other than MBTI, what are some other concepts you're passionate about? Being a good person, being psychologically aware, physical consent in relationships is something I'm really passionate about. Facilitating helpful tools to heal from trauma and other things in therapy, but with the goal of actually getting better rather than being a perpetual victim or perpetually stewing. Really passionate about that. And then God and my faith, also very passionate about that. Those things I can talk about for a very long time. How do you discuss MBTI with people who have maybe only taken the 16 personalities test, if they're sort of interested but don't know anything at all about the functions? There's just so much. I wonder if you have any thoughts on where to start. I figure this would also depend on how much time you have to explain it. 100%. Just suss out their interest. Obviously you can't go into the functions at a birthday party. It's hard. I've just started saying like, oh, you're interested, and like I suss out how interested they are, and based on like, you can usually sense whether they just kind of think it's a fun thing to discuss or whether they're actually interested in the theory and actually interested in understanding themselves and others. If it's the former, I'll just kind of entertain the conversation and let them sort of stick with their understanding of it. Might mention the fact that the tests aren't great, might mention that there's Jungian functions just to see if they bite. And then if they're the latter, then I'll often say, just because I don't want to like hog them for the whole night or like take away from my experience of the night or their experience of the night, I'll often say like, look, if you're actually interested, check out my YouTube channel or this YouTube channel or this YouTube channel or this podcast, or we can like meet for coffee, depending my relationship with the person, meet for coffee, and like I'll give you the presentation. Before you met your husband, did you consider not to ever date again and enjoying the rest of your life as a single person? Absolutely. I'd reached a point with dating where I 100%, like when I lived with my housemates, they'll tell you there was a period where I was like, let's all just become female single saints and be nuns and just be really virtuous and kind and change the world and just live for God and we'll be so amazing. Anyway, that was when I was insanely wounded by my dating experiences. But yeah, I've considered just being single. Anytime I wasn't dating someone, I was like, yeah, might just be single. I really enjoyed single life. There's so many things about single life that are fantastic, like the expendable income, just doing literally whatever you want, whenever you want. The independence, like, yeah, 100%, though marriage is also great. Why did you choose the names you have for your MBTI characters? There's no rhyme or reason behind that, I'm afraid. Since discovering MBTI, have you realized any drawbacks to such a radical change of perceiving yourself in the world? I feel like I can see my social environment much more quickly than in my previous life, but I often feel like an alien. How would you navigate this? All the best. I think when we first get into MBTI, it can feel like we have the keys to the kingdom and all this knowledge that people don't have. We have to accept that people are different. Not everyone has interest in personality theory the way that we do, so wouldn't find value out of that kind of stuff anyway. There are multiple ways to get value in your life. There are multiple ways to be a good person in life. There are drawbacks to learning about the MBTI system. I think as you get used to it and living with it, and you kind of learn what's actually applicable and what isn't, you can just generally live a good normal life with a tool kind of that you can reference when you need to understand yourself and others. But I think, yeah, at the beginning, it can kind of make you feel quite isolated for caring about something that you think every single person should care about, and why don't they care about it, and all that jazz. If your husband was willing to give you a bunch of math or physics lessons, how willing would you be to patiently sit and listen? If you're willing to give your husband a bunch of literature or drama lessons, how willing do you think he would be to patiently sit and listen? The answer is we are both willing to be patient and sit and listen. But given that our interests don't overlap in those areas, like I don't have an interest in the things he has interest in, well, obviously there's some overlapping interest, but like he's big into sport, specifically Formula One, and you know, he's a civil engineer and he knows a lot about tunnels, for instance, and he loves talking about those things, and I'm always willing to listen. But am I going to remember what he says? No, because not necessarily, because you know, you're way more inclined to pay attention to and retain information when you're personally interested in the subject matter. And so I will listen to him talk until the cows come home, but I'm not going to retain it all necessarily, and vice versa with the stuff I'm interested in that he isn't. And to expect that of each other is kind of like gonna set yourselves up for a bit of misery. So I think it's important to understand that whilst it's nice that your spouse listen to you and it's very loving, to expect them to retain or be interested in what you're interested in is kind of unrealistic, and you have to allow them to have their own passions and interests that don't align with yours, and you wouldn't want them to expect you to be interested in those things either that you aren't interested in. And it's just nice to view it through the lens of, wow, isn't it so nice and loving that they're sitting and listening? How are you getting on with your pregnancy, and do you have any aspirations for the future you'd like to share with us? I just want to be a good mother. Yeah, I do have a few aspirations here and there. None that I think I would be comfortable, like that are so solid that I would want to share them on the YouTube channel. But I think generally speaking, being a good mother, being a competent mother. And how am I getting on with my pregnancy? As I said, it's been hard, but very glad to be pregnant. And I already love this little cherub so much. Favorite book? The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. What is your A, favorite movie? I don't have one off the top of my head. B, TV show. Can't go past Friends, Scrubs, New Girl, and Frasier. Anime, probably Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. And cartoon, I don't know an answer to that. My daughter was recently typed by Joyce Meng. Love Joyce Meng. As an ESFP, I was wondering if there was some things in your childhood that your parents did or did not do that would have made your life better, or at the very least things that you wish that they did or didn't do differently regarding your type. Thank you for considering a response. My parents are lovely, and I had a great childhood. I would say that it's important that you allow your child to have emotional expression somehow, and they are going to want to do that in their physical space. They're going to need freedom in their physical space. I definitely don't think I was given enough freedom. I was living in quite a sheltered home, and obviously my parents were none the wiser to what made me different from my siblings in that way, like in the cognitive function way. But yeah, I didn't have a lot of physical freedom, and so I did not learn a lot about myself until 18 when I finally had that freedom. So allow your child to go out and experience things with your approval, and you know, things that might scare you to allow them to experience. Just you know, maybe just provide a good safe space for them to talk about those things when they come back. Physical freedom to explore and emotional expression is very important. They're going to have crazy feelings that come out in crazy ways with that SEFI combination, and they need to feel like they have freedom to express those and make sense of those, and that they're not going to get judged or ridiculed for having those. Because gosh, as a teenager, your emotions are so big and you just cannot understand them, and you just want to understand them, and you don't know anything else but to express them. That is your only truth and your only reality in that moment. So to help them learn about their emotions, just allow them to express them and talk about them and ask about their emotions and their emotional experience and what they're going through. And yeah, allow them to go out and practice their hobbies or explore That's what I would say. Do you know of any introverted, less talkative ESFPs? Yes, I do. I'm probably one of the more extreme ESFPs, but I know some more chill ones. I don't think you have to be loud and outgoing to be an ESFP. It's at the end of the day, just your cognitive functions that four-letter code is pointing to. Do you think you have any favorite types without intending it? I did think long and hard about this when I saw the question. If I'm honest, I don't have favorite types, but there are types where if I notice someone has a certain personality, I'll be more comfortable around them faster, as opposed to other types who are more introverted people. I always am a little bit less comfortable around when I first meet them, because I'm like, how much of my personality is too much? Am I making you feel uncomfortable? What's the vibe? Do you find some people much easier to type than others? For instance, let's say a person has 2 ENTPs in their life and it's very obvious one is an ENTP, but the other person is much harder to be sure that there's their type. Is there something you experienced? Absolutely. Nurture affects this very much. 2 ENTPs can look very different. Generally speaking, the only trend I found with this though is, for me, typing people, is that introverts are much harder for me to type. Simply, how do you feel? Right now I feel happy. I have a really great weekend planned, so that makes me feel really happy. In life, apprehensive, nervous, excited. I feel quite lonely at the moment, just with Andrew's long hours and me being particularly house-ridden at the moment, but I'm grateful for the life that we have. How, as an EP, are you managing to make so many great videos as an EP? The key to being a content creator as an EP is to just kind of keep your options open and create on your own terms. It's important to create content that is important to you and to strike when inspiration hits, and to not box yourself into too many things, because then you'll just start to resent it. Have you ever considered a collaboration with Frank James? Yes, we had a lovely chat probably about a year and a half, 2 years ago at this point. Yeah, and we did discuss a collaboration, but I think, we're both kind of going through similar life stages, him with marriage and 2 kids now, and me with marriage and being pregnant, and I just don't think it's a priority to collaborate with other creators in general at the moment. So maybe one day. Consider the following list of traits: intelligence, beauty, health, money. A divine entity offers you the chance to augment 2 for the rest of your life at the expense of sacrificing the remaining ones. Which one do you choose? I would choose health and intelligence. Although by money, what do you mean? Like money, enough money to kind of get by and be comfortable, or like being rich? Because I don't need to be rich, but if by money you mean just like kind of enough money to always be comfortable and be able to pay for your family and your bills and stuff, then maybe I'd choose health and money. But I think intelligence and health probably. In a bookstore, you find a novel about the fascinating adventures of a young woman. You decide to buy it and manage to read the whole thing. The book finishes with the tragic death of the female protagonist. On the very last page, the author writes, "Inspired by the life of dear Kristen." The next day, you notice that you have begun to go through the events narrated in the first story. What do you do next? I would pray. I would make sure I'm good with all the people in my life, good with God, and it would be a nice kick up the bottom to just be a better human on the off chance that I'm gonna die at the end of these events. Otherwise, I'd just keep living my life and living every day for what it is. NASA's next move is launching a 3rd space probe, Voyager 3. Just like its predecessor, it will carry a new golden record, which will include a set of songs destined to portray life on Earth in recent years, as well as the current state of humanity. You've been offered the opportunity to submit a song of your preference for the Voyager 3 record. What song would you send? That's a hard one. I don't know how to answer it, if I'm completely honest. I'd probably just put my favorite song on there, which is Wild Blue by John Mayer. That changes from time to time, but that's been a front runner for a while. I was thinking about starting a typology club in my college. Yay or nay? Why the heck not? How good? Meeting like-minded people with similar interests to you? Love it. Go ahead. Which type is rarest according to all the people you've typed in real life? No internet people involved. I had to think about this, and I think I can't really say this for any type, but I can say that the rarest kinds of people I've come across are ENTP females. I can only think of like 2 in my life, or people I've come across who are ENTP females. So let me know. Do you relate to that? Do you ever wonder what would happen if you were in Star Wars during the original trilogy and you found out you had the Force? Also on an unrelated note, how did you learn acting? Some random INTJ. If I learned I had the Force, I'd probably just learn to use it responsibly. Although if I'm in that universe, I'd probably be a completely different person, so my values would be different. And I'd have to reconcile the Force with my faith if I was the current Kristen that I am. And then I would have to decide whether I can ethically use the Force and all that. So I'd go through all that, and then if I could use it, I'd probably just use it for good. Find out how I could use it. After all, with great power comes great responsibility, so I would need to use it wisely, though I'd have a little bit of fun with it too. How did I learn acting? I don't know how I learned it. I think acting is very inherent to my personality, if I'm honest, but I got comfortable on stage through basically doing drama and theatre classes since I was essentially 6, although it took me a long time to come out of my shell. But yeah, essentially I've been acting on and off, like I skipped a few years here and there, but generally speaking, I've been acting since I was 6, I would say. Do I like pineapple and pizza? Yes, but it's not my go-to. What is your father's MBTI type? ENTJ. Do you like staying away from politics or having political opinions so as to avoid heartbreak and brain rot? Heartbreak, that's interesting, and brain rot, interesting. I love listening to other people's politics or political opinions. I find that I'm quite out of my depth in conversations like that. There are only certain things, if they happen to touch on my values, that I have very strong opinions about when it comes to political opinions. But like, I'm very unaware of what's going on with the political scene in Australia. That's not something that I just am drawn to or interested in. That said, if I think that there's an important issue, I'll do my best to be educated on it. But I must say, yeah, like I don't tend to bring up those conversations very often. But like when they do come up, I'll contribute where I can, or I'll listen and learn where I can. I love listening and learning, and I've listened to like podcasts and YouTube videos and video essays and stuff on what's happening in the political climate of the world, or like just people's opinions, sometimes political debates. You know, I have a lot of long drives living in Sydney because it's so big, so I do throw on podcasts like that occasionally and I enjoy it. What is your height? I am 178 centimeters, which I believe is 5'10" or 11. Are you a born again Christian or maybe a different denomination? I've seen a lot of Christian imagery scattered throughout your videos. I am Catholic, though I did have a reversion to the faith at around 25 years old. And this is the last YouTube question, I believe. How often do you read about MBTI and how do you avoid confusion from different descriptions, random personal experiences, and the fact that it's not scientifically proven? I don't read about it that often, and I'm at a point now where I've made so much sense of the system in my own brain that I don't really rely on other people's descriptions and stuff like that, but I still like listening to content because I love hearing people's perspectives, and sometimes they might make me aware of a new perspective or something I hadn't thought about before, but generally speaking, I trust my own understanding of it. How do you put MBTI in practical use? Do you share your insights about it with many people in your life? Do you make any concrete plans for developing your personalities? You mean my types in my skits? I don't really share it with people in my life. I had my period of doing that when I first learned about it. If they show interest, I will talk about it with them. And then do I put it to practical use? Yes, every day. As I said, it's a tool that's kind of running in the back of my head and it really helps me in understanding others. Are you going to teach your kids about it? How soon are you willing to try type them? I don't think I'll teach my kids about it. If they grow up and start to show interest in things like personality theory, psychology and stuff like that, I might go into it with them. Obviously, they're going to see the channel at some point and I'll explain why I'm interested in it, and then they can maybe use that as like a starting point for seeing whether they're interested. But I won't force them to listen to me talk about it or learn about it or anything. And am I willing to try type them? I think it's inevitable that I will notice tendencies in their behavior and like make conclusions about their type. But I think it's actually harder to type people when you are intimately close to them or like when you know them super well. That said, I like to think maybe as children, their dominant cognitive functions will be a bit more obvious. With my nieces and nephews, it's been easier than I thought, I think. So yeah, I think it's inevitable I'm gonna type them, but I don't think I'll be sharing their type with them unless they show interest. All right, we have powered through those questions. Well, I don't know about powering through, far out. I started filming this like 2 hours ago. Those are the YouTube questions. I am now gonna answer the Instagram questions. What keeps you going every day? Honestly, it's my faith. It's my faith in the transcendental, in something greater than myself, which gives me a reason to do the things that I do every day, to be a good person, to keep chasing virtue, to keep loving my husband and my friends and all that. It comes down to my faith. How are you? How can we be praying for you? Just that my transition into motherhood goes smoothly. I would really appreciate that. Thank you for asking. Advice to fellow Christians for balancing our cognitive functions with scripture and prayer. I think just be open to, obviously, God's grace and his gifts are universal to everyone, regardless of type. So I believe that you can attain all virtues no matter what type you are. But just be aware of the things that give you energy and the ways in which you see God. I often experience God in going out and being with people and with the world. Those are my gifts. That's my personality. So just be aware of what God has blessed you with in terms of your cognitive functions, personality, and gifts, and lean into those because he wants to use your gifts to glorify the kingdom. What types or cognitive functions might despise surprise parties? Probably any NI-DOM, specifically INTJ, because they don't use FE. How can you tell the difference between NE and NI in daily habits? I mean, just the chaos of NE, really. It's It's very hard to isolate the two functions without their opposite function and also without taking into consideration the cognitive function stack and what else they're working with. But yeah, just the chaos and the objective nature of NE as opposed to the subjective nature of NI and the need for distilling and order in the abstract. How can you tell the difference between TI and FI, especially in decision making? Gosh, I mean, FI doesn't use logical frameworks. An FI user is going to be speaking very emotionally about how they feel. They're going to be referencing themselves. They're going to be using emotive language. FI will make decisions very much based on a feeling or a sense or an impression they have rather than a logical framework. And TI will need to gather all of the pieces of information before they can make a decision, whereas FI doesn't necessarily need to. That's not as important. I think I'm okay with that answer. Haven't thought about it too much. When did you get married with your ENTJ fiance and how many months of pregnancy? We got married in November last year and our baby is due August 25th. So about 7.5 months now. How has your faith impacted your character development personality journey? Hope you're doing great. Thank you. Well, my faith has been my why for everything. The reason why I seek to be a better person, chase the things I do, have made the decisions I do are very much to do with God, who I believe is the ultimate goodness and the ultimate love, source of love, and loves me so much. And I want to be in union with him. And to be in union with ultimate goodness is to seek ultimate goodness and to seek good virtue. So that's why I seek what I do on the day-to-day. And I think that goes hand in hand with character development. Kristen, why do you roast INFJ so badly? Because the stereotype is hilarious. Come on, you have to acknowledge it's a funny stereotype. Also, you guys are the ones who are like mostly online. Like as a recent poll showed, most of my audience are IN types. So naturally I'm going to roast the types from whom I get the most response. It's funnier that way. Why are you so hard on ENFJs? We're very sensitive, you know. Again, hilarious stereotype. And you know, you may be sensitive. Not all of you are. I know that for a fact. I know a lot of you enjoy the stereotype. I think I'm hard on all the types in their own way, but I just think, yeah, ENFJ stereotype is a lot of fun for me. I love the passive aggressive thing. It's very fun to act and write, and it's a good character to have in any kind of conversation or dynamic. Not just passive aggressive, but like the social facilitator. And I like to think if someone's coming back to my channel and watching the content and drawn to it, they don't necessarily mind being roasted. So what's the 16 personality series that you've scrapped? Oh yes, I've scrapped the AI poetry. I did just 2 videos, I think, in that series, and then one that I actually never released publicly. It was just on the Patreon, AI poetry, which I tried to put my own little creative spin on it, but I think people were kind of a bit like morally conflicted when it came to AI, and I also was, and I didn't know where I fully sat on it, so I scrapped it. Do you have any tips for dealing with uncertainty about one's own MBTI type? Again, as I said earlier, ask your friends about you. What advice do you give to an INTJ mother who has an ESFP daughter and ENFP son? Just, oh goodness, just let them frolic. Let them frolic. You're probably gonna love it. Let them go out, experience the world, do their thing. Give them the freedom. I think that will actually come naturally to you more so than you think. So how were you traumatized by FE? Ha ha ha. I am not traumatized by FE. I really am not. I guess I don't understand FE, but I've not been traumatized by it. Did you have a baby name list growing up? Yes, I did. And we are not using any of those names. Is it difficult to portray the TI users in sketches since your blind spot is TI supposedly? Yes, it is. I often need help with the TI types. Out of all the types, those are the types that I ask for the most help with. Do you have a fictional character you relate most to personality-wise? Goodness me, I cannot think off the top of my head right now, but I think sort of any character who who's trying to make a serious situation fun. Like I remember relating to Chris Pratt's character in Guardian of the Galaxy, and like the whole Guardians of the Galaxy and the whole Avengers universe. Because I remember in the first one, I think he was going to get some orb or something from like a dark cave, and he had his music in and he was dancing at the same time. And I was like, this would be me. I relate to this big time. Do you think you'll ever offer typing sessions? No, because again, I don't think that's my gift, and I wouldn't trust that my types would be 100% accurate, and I would feel guilty charging people for that. That's just me. Do you sometimes get tired of MBTI? Be honest. Not tired of it, but I think I've definitely been on a journey with it. I definitely think about it less, and I guess actively talk about it less. And I think that's because of a number of reasons. What I said earlier about kind of realizing the more you learn about something, the less you can ever learn about it, because it's such a big, complex topic. And then also just my life changing and new things coming up in my life that are kind of taking a priority, like marriage and kids and stuff. How much does Andrew relate to any of the ENTJ stereotypes you portray? We haven't actually talked about it, but I know he would relate because I base some of them on him. Does living in Australia make you tough since you have so many dangerous animals? I cannot explain to you how little of a factor this is in Australian life. Everyone's like, how can you live there with animals? I'm like, I forget we have animals. I live in the city. Yeah, we get big like huntsman spiders, but they don't harm you at all. I've never encountered a snake or like a crocodile. I have had a few kind of scary interactions with kangaroos, but that's like when I go out to the bushlands on like a retreat or something. It doesn't happen in your backyard as often as you might think. I know Australian animals can look really scary, but they are not, a lot of them aren't dangerous and aren't actually scary. And that was the last question, guys. This was such a long video. Thank you so much if you stayed until the end. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all of your questions. I'm sorry that this video was so long, but I figured it was better to put it in one video than two. I might put timestamps, depends on how much effort I can be bothered to put into this. It would be a lot to put timestamps, so I'm sorry if there aren't, but also sorry if there are, because that's a lot of text. Thanks for entertaining me during this lonely day in my house, and thank you for supporting the channel consistently throughout the pregnancy and for continuing to watch my videos and for understanding that things are gonna have to change. I really appreciate the support I've got from you guys, and I hope you keep getting value out of my content. So feel free to respond to anything that I've said in this video in the comments. I realized I didn't give a lot of in-depth answers, but I couldn't. And I was like, not sure if it was better to deal with less questions and more nuance than more questions and less nuance, but I've gone with that option. So I hope you got value out of it regardless. Always keen to start off conversations between you guys in the comments, so go nuts if you have any thoughts. Other than that, thank you for watching and I'll catch you next time. Bye.